Last time, we proved the INC, or Iglesia Ni Cristo, runs on one rule: authority equals truth. But who owns that authority? See, we're not just talking about INC abstract theology. We're talking about a central office acting as the control tower for your conscience. When the administration speaks, your mind doesn't just obey, it starts policing itself against any doubt. And today, I'm going to expose how that leadership becomes untouchable, how scandals are scrubbed, and how unity is weaponized to make you defend your own cage. And if you feel that familiar chest-tightening guilt right now, don't ignore it. That guilt is the mechanism working. You ready? All right, let's break the machine. Point 1, the deification of leadership. So perhaps the most powerful and insidious form of thought control in the Iglesia Ni Cristo is how it elevates its founder, Felix Manalo, and his successors to a status that borders on deification, or to make like God. You see, INC teaches that Manalo wasn't just a smart guy or a reformer, but God's sugo, or last messenger, a prophetic figure foretold in the Bible. Now, officially, they'll say the Manalos aren't divine, or Felix is not divine, but in practice, this doctrine is the linchpin of the whole system. And it's psychologically brilliant because first, it makes obedience to the church administration the same thing as obedience to God. Members aren't encouraged to check the leadership's decisions against the Bible. They're taught the leadership is the living voice of the Bible. So questioning the administration isn't just questioning a man, it's questioning God's chosen one, and by extension, God himself. Second, this creates a perfectly sealed system of authority. You see, in a typical church, if you disagree with a leader, you can appeal to a higher authority. You can appeal to a denominational board, an elder board, sometimes historic Christian teaching, or scripture itself is the highest authority. But in the INC, there's no one to appeal to since the administration is God's exclusive mouthpiece. Any criticism is by definition wrong. The system gets to be its own judge, jury, and executioner. So this creates a terrifying sense of finality for any member with doubts. And third, it creates a full-blown personality cult. The group's entire identity is fused with its leader. Loyalty isn't to God, but to the Manalo dynasty. And here's where it gets really weird. This same former INC officer explained to me that some doctrines look harmless at first, like the Bible is the basis of our faith, right? Sounds good. It sounds good from the outside. I can get down with that. But then the INC leadership scales it into the real center of gravity, the human authority of the administration, the Manalo dynasty. He points out something that should make any honest person pause. The so-called fundamental doctrines have expanded over time. You had about 20 during Felix Manalo's era, then 28 under Arano, and now extending to over 30 under Eduardo. While members are told nothing has changed. Are you kidding me? That is a textbook thought control move. Let me break it down. First, they change the system. Then they deny the change. Then they brand critics as instruments of Satan, and then keep members from looking behind the curtain. He also described narrative control that works like a memory hole. You see, he told me he was part of many INC teams during his time as an INC member. And on one team in particular, they were instructed to edit out ministers who had been expelled. So they were taking out anything that could stain the image for new viewers or new members. And this matters because it conditions the mind to believe the system is perfect, that it's spotless, it's unified and unbroken. Because anything that contradicts that picture gets scrubbed before you ever see it. A member's spiritual worth in the INC is measured by their submission to the administration. And this is not the model of the Apostle Paul, who told his followers, "Follow me as I follow Christ," making it clear that human leaders are fallible, they can be flawed, and we must always point to a higher authority, Jesus Christ. But in the INC, the chain of command effectively stops at the central office. And so this functional idolatry of the INC is a hallmark of high control groups, and it's the mechanism that grants the leadership near absolute power over the minds of its followers. Brings us to point 2, the erasure of self. So the grand finale of all these techniques is what Dr. Hassan calls the creation of a cult identity. This is the new artificial self built from the group's doctrines, the loaded language, and that prescribed ways of thinking. So your authentic pre-INC self with all your quirky thoughts and opinions is systematically bulldozed and then replaced. It's the equivalent of trading in a classic custom-made car for a beige Ford Fiesta. Blah. All right, and this starts with the intensive indoctrination all new members go through. And we're not talking casual Bible studies here. We're talking sessions of cognitive demolition and then reconstruction. The same series of lessons are drilled over and over and over again using the exact same arguments and proof texts. And we know from basic neuroscience that this level of repetition is incredibly effective at rewiring the human brain. What's familiar starts to feel like what's true. And this mental cookie-cutter approach is then reinforced socially. Inside the tight-knit Iglesia Ni Cristo community, conformity gets you rewarded. Members who parrot the administration's talking points, who show zealous obedience, and who recruit new members are given status and praise. Think of it as the world's most boring high school, all right? Wear the right uniform, repeat the teacher's answers verbatim, and you get a gold star. But on the flip side, those who ask probing questions are subtly or not so subtly punished. They get labeled weak in faith or accused of sowing disunity. And this creates a powerful incentive to fall in line and think, speak, and act just like everyone else. And over time, members are cut off from outside perspectives. Their social circle is almost entirely INC, their media is monitored, and their free time is eaten up by church activities. Their whole world gets filtered through an INC lens, and the new cult identity takes over. Their speech patterns start to mimic the ministers, their emotions align with whatever the group says is appropriate. The person they were before is now buried under layers of programmed INC thoughts. And adult converts can essentially learn how to trust unlearn how to trust your own judgment. You become dependent on the organization for your own sense of self. And the biblical call to be transformed by the renewing of your mind is really tragically inverted. Instead of a renewed mind, the member is left with a replaced one. Point 3, the rationalization machine. One of the most psychologically brilliant and, in my opinion, frankly, evil and twisted part of the INC's thought control system is how it gets members to passionately defend the very system that entraps them. So it's a textbook case of cognitive dissonance resolution. See, cognitive dissonance is the mental agony you feel when you hold two contradictory beliefs or when your beliefs smash up against your real life experiences. Now, for an INC member, this conflict can be brutal. Their hardcore belief is at the center that Iglesia Ni Cristo is God's one true church and its leaders are divinely guided. But their experience might be witnessing hypocrisy, feeling the sting of shunning, or being constantly squeezed for money. And this creates a painful mental jam, and the brain has to resolve it. And since questioning the core belief feels like spiritual suicide, it defaults to only one other option: explaining away the bad experience. And so the rationalization machine kicks into high gear. And we saw this in the comments in part 1, where members cried out that authoritarian control isn't abuse, it's loving discipline. The suppression of questions isn't censorship, it's guarding against deception. We also heard the emotional harm caused by the group's policies becomes a test of faith. So this reframing is a powerful defense mechanism. It lets the members keep their beliefs in the group's perfection while explaining away all the evidence to the contrary. They become experts at justifying the unjustifiable. And my INC insider friend gave a simple example of what I'll call authority over reality. He says, members are trained not to question the official INC timeline around World War I, even when standard history doesn't match what they're told. And that's not a trivial detail, because mainstream historical timelines commonly date the outbreak of World War I to July 28, 1914, when Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. You can check the Library of Congress on this. But what you see here is you see the mechanism matters. When the administration decides anything, the member is trained to treat the decision as more authoritative than the external world, even if the external world is screaming the real objective truth in plain sight with documented evidence. And another thing that former members have often noted is that INC members can be loud critics of political corruption, all while turning a blind eye to the corruption in their own church. And this is because their programming just won't let them apply the same critical standard to the God-appointed administration. And this is the final lock on the mental cage. The member isn't just a prisoner, they've been handed the blueprints to the prison and taught to call it a sanctuary. It's a center of worship for them. And we've talked about the theory of thought control. We've looked at the definitions. But does this actually happen in real life? Is it happening right now? Well, I didn't have to look far for evidence. I just had to look at the comments section of my last video. And this brings us to point 4, the comments. See, when you critique a high control group, you rarely get engagement with the argument. They don't care about your argument. You don't get people saying, I disagree with your exegesis of John 1:1 or John 17. And here's why. Instead, you get thought-stopping cliches and loaded language. And let me show you exactly what I mean. So look at this comment from a viewer named Batnam, or first the denial. He says, no one forces you, but then immediately he pivots to the ultimate thought stopper. There's only one true church. This is a textbook thought-stopping cliche. It's a pre-programmed phrase that the brain uses to shut down the discomfort of my critique. He doesn't have to think about my arguments because he's already labeled his group, the INC, as the one true church. And if they are the only true church, then by definition, everyone else is wrong and no further thinking is required. Boom, thought control, all right? Next, let's look at this one by this user and notice the immediate escalation here. I posted a psychological analysis of a church structure. How is that labeled? Well, look at it. Satanic actions, right? This is loaded language. In a high control group, you cannot just be mistaken or critical, you must be evil. So by framing my video as satanic, the member protects themselves from even having to listen to it. Why would a faithful Christian listen to Satan? It's a defense mechanism disguised as INC doctrine. And finally, the appeal to authority by this one, Roy Tanaha. This commenter says, I shouldn't be talking to them or to the internet. I should just write to Central to debate the ministers, the central administration. You see that? Why? Because in their thought control model, the individual member is not empowered to defend their faith. They're trained to defer to the administration. So the implied message here is, I'm not allowed to think about this, and neither are you. Only the ministers at Central can have the answers. All right? So these comments, they weren't coordinated. These people probably don't know each other. Yet they all responded with the exact same patterns, using the exact same loaded words to achieve the exact same result, to stop thinking about the criticism. If that isn't thought control, folks, I don't know what is. So there you have it, the chilling architecture of thought control. And again, this isn't about members being unintelligent. No, I'm not saying that at all. It's a testament to the power of systematic psychological manipulation. This is a crucial piece of the puzzle because once the mind is contained, the heart is the next territory to be conquered. So if any of this resonated with you, or if you've seen these techniques in any group, share your story down in the comments. I want to tell you that your voice matters. Breaking the isolation that these groups depend on is how we start to push back. And make sure that you subscribe, because next, in part 4, we're going to expose how the Iglesia Ni Cristo weaponizes emotions like fear of hell, humiliation, shame, and conditional affection to keep people bound long after the sermons end and the doors are locked. It's going to be a blast, folks. Don't forget to catch up on the whole Exposing Iglesia Ni Cristo series and also learn how to defend the Trinity better. Both of those should be linked above. This is Apex Apologetic, equipping believers to engage culture with biblical clarity and to defend the faith once for all delivered to the saints. I'm Dr. Shaun Michael, and I'll see you in the next episode. Out.